Hi everybody, so we'll get started. There are a couple of people I can see that are just joining the room, but that's fine. We'll kind of crack on through, and as people join, that's no worries. Can I just get a quick message from you guys in the chat to let me know if you can hear me okay? Just say yes, hello, hi, kind of whatever works, just to make sure you can hear me. Great, loud and clear, thank you. So just to introduce myself, my name's Jai Tyler. I am one of the employability coaches here, which means I do a lot of coaching with students and graduates. And also my background personally is I've worked a lot in the creative industries and done a lot of work supporting young people and emerging artists who face additional difficulties in their lives. So I'm hoping that I can bring some of the strategies I've used with people I've worked with in the past to this session today. Thank you all for being here. Sunny day. I know it's nice outside. I really appreciate you being in the room. And just a couple of things to let you know about the session before we begin. If you've signed in today just with your first name or with a nickname or something like this, if you can just pop me a personal message in the chat, or you can put it in the main chat if you don't mind, to let me know your full name. If you've already done this, I've messaged a few people, ignore that, but if you've signed in just with your first name, just let me know your full name, and that just means that I can make sure you're marked as attended for the session, and that'll just ensure that you get the slides and everything afterwards. So the session is being recorded today, and you will get sent the recording of the session, and you'll get sent the slides from this session within 5 working days. So by this time next week, you'll get everything kind of sent through to you. And the session recording, I believe, is just being shared with the people in the room. So yeah, if you don't want to unmute yourself, if you want to use the chat box for a bit more of kind of anonymity, that's completely fine. What else should I let you know about? Throughout the session, I'm also going to reference a few different workshops that we've got going on this week that kind of tie into some of the themes that I'll be talking about, that you might find useful things to attend if you want to find out some more information. So at the end of the workshop, I'll send you a link to where you can find all of the different events and book onto sessions, so don't worry about that. Obviously, we're working remotely at the moment, so just a note to say, if for any reason the session drops out for you, your internet drops, just rejoin the session. That's completely fine to dip in and out like that. Just try and rejoin. And similarly, I haven't had any difficulties lately, but just in case I do disappear, just wait around for me for a minute and I'll do my best to rejoin the session. I don't imagine that will happen, but just in case. And at the end of the workshop as well, I'll share a feedback link with you guys. So basically, it'll be really helpful for us to get some feedback on how you found the session, whether it was what you were expecting, whether it's useful, but also particularly whether you kind of find it useful to have sessions in this remote format moving forward. It could be something that we continue to do if people prefer to access things in that way, or maybe you want a bit of both. So I'll share the link with you for that at the end. But for now, let's get stuck in. So today we're talking about job hunting in difficult times. And in terms of what we're going to talk about today, we're going to cover kind of the 2 elements of job hunting in difficult times. There's the strategies for finding work, so actually the job hunting element of it. So if you found the perfect job, how we can support you with your application, what to do if you can't find a suitable job to apply for, and some tips on applications and kind of keeping on top of things logistically. And then the other side, obviously, the difficult times. I feel like for everybody, you know, it's been a bit of an up and down wave through lockdown. So I'm going to talk about some of these ideas for kind of surviving and thriving in difficult times. And as I say, my background is particularly in working in diversity and inclusion and working with people who have faced difficulties in their lives. So I'm just going to bring some of the stuff that I've found useful in the past, and some ideas around building resilience, dealing with failure, and challenging your inner critic. So those are the topics that we'll cover in the session today. And I'll also signpost you to how you can get some kind of one-to-one support and feedback if that would be useful to you. Today's session does focus, the job hunting section particularly does focus around the idea that you might already have an idea of what you want to do with your career, with your next steps. But if you're someone who thinks, actually, I'm not sure, I really don't know, I just wanted to highlight this workshop, which is focused completely around choosing a career and how you make that decisions in case that's useful. That's next week. And as I say, at the end of the workshop, I'll share a link to where you can find all of the events if that would be helpful to you. So to begin with, these are some of the kind of worries or concerns that I've had conversations with people about in the past, so around this topic. So maybe it's that I can't find anything I want to apply for, I've applied to things but I'm not being successful, I'm worried there won't be any jobs available right now, I'm feeling stressed out or overwhelmed, I feel self-doubt, or my inner critic stops me from doing things. But I wanted to know from you, what are your worries or concerns, or what is it that you would like to take away from this workshop? Because then if I can, I'll tailor it around to you a little during this session. So if maybe there is something that you would really like to learn from today's session, something that you had in mind that brought you here, if you're open to sharing that in the chat, that'd be great. And if you're not, that's okay too. So I'll just wait a little second in case there is anything that people are wanting to share. Learning about international opportunities. Charlie, we won't specifically focus on international opportunities, but we will talk, I suppose, around some strategies for job hunting and finding things, and also how you can have a one-to-one session. So it might be useful. I can, at the end, I can share with you a helpful link around international job hunting. And also, I really recommend coming along to an appointment as well, because it might help us to focus specifically on that if that's useful to you. Settling into an area, struggling to find things I want to apply for, worried about finding graduate level jobs. Okay, yeah, great. And as we go along, if you do have questions or if there are things you'd like me to cover, feel free to pop that in the chat box. I'll do my best to respond in the moment, but we've got a couple of points for questions as well as we go along. So to begin with, looking into strategies for finding work, we're going to cover over these three areas. So the ideal scenario is you find the perfect role you want to apply for, and I know that's kind of what people are struggling with at the minute. So I just wanted to signpost, if you do find the perfect thing you want to apply for, here are some ways that we can support you, and then we'll dig into the, okay, if you can't find something. So some of the things that we offer is that you can attend workshops, and I really recommend these because they are really designed around giving you the inside scoop from employers. What is it that employers kind of look for in applicants at different stages? How can you best prepare? And there's a couple of sessions we've got coming up over the next couple of weeks. So you're hired, ASAT interview, creating effective application forms. So if you're asked to complete an application form, your approach to that we recommend is slightly different to just sending your CV. And then a CV and cover letter workshop that I'll run next week, which focuses around, okay, what is it that employers are looking for and how do they decide yes or no based on your application. So you can come along to the workshops. You can also meet us for a one-to-one appointment. So this is a really normal thing, and this, you can bring anything career related to the appointment, but you might find it helpful if you found the perfect job but you're thinking, actually I really want some advice and some tips on how to write the best application so that I get an interview, or maybe you've got an interview and you're worried about that stage. We can support you with all of that. And also, and you can book that through My Career. When I send you the slides, these are all hyperlinked here for you, so you'll be able to just click straight through. And you can also get application feedback, or again use this function. We've got a function in My Career called Questions, where you can send in an application and we'll essentially pretend we're the employer and kind of give you some feedback on your application. We might say, actually, you've covered these areas, but we feel like you've missed this, so maybe build on this area a bit. So I just wanted to highlight those things in case you do happen upon the perfect job. We really want to support you to get that, and also that support continues after you graduate. So up to 3 years after you graduate, you can access this support. So that's a really amazing offering. I've worked at other universities where kind of when you graduate, that support completely stops. So just to let you know about that if you are at that point of graduation soon. So here's the more likely one, the more likely situation that people might be in, and definitely conversations I've been having with people around in appointments recently, is that I can't find anything suitable to apply for. So I've got two strategies or ways that you might kind of approach this that I'll cover off. So one strategy is to apply speculatively. So what this means is making a speculative, it's really hard to say, making a speculative application means getting in touch with an organisation to ask whether they have a suitable job for you, despite the fact that they aren't advertising a particular vacancy. And it usually involves sending a cover letter and CV. So a common conversation I have with people is, oh, I'm looking for jobs, I've looked on the job ads boards, and I can't find anything that fits my requirements. And actually, a huge number of small and medium-sized organisations will recruit through speculative applications. So the larger organisations, the really big the really big companies often will advertise always, but actually small and medium-sized organisations do employ people through this route. And I'm going to touch on a couple of tips that we have around speculative applications, and of course you can always come to us for that one-to-one feedback. So first of all, reflect on the roles you'd like to apply for. So think to yourself, actually, what is it I want to apply for? And then research relevant organisations that you might approach. And actually using key search terms in Google Maps is a great way to discover kind of companies, particularly if you're looking in a specific area. Maybe you can only travel via public transport, or you want to stay local to where you're living at the moment. So this is a quick search I did for graphic design companies here, and it can sometimes be more effective than using the normal Google search. You can get support from us, so you can book a one-to-one appointment to support you with your search. So if you say, actually, I want to look at these types of companies, but I'm not sure what search terms I should be using, or do you have any other tips of ways I could connect with employers? You know, you can come to us for that kind of support. And also, when you come to write your application, we can give you some advice around writing your application, how to tailor your application through appointments or through my career questions. And there's also a couple of guides that I've hyperlinked here. I can send them in the chat at the end if that's helpful, which kind of talk about how to make speculative applications and how to approach this, and some tips, because essentially when you're writing a speculative application, you're writing to someone who's not expecting you to be writing to them. So in the same way as if you get a letter through the door that says, "Dear Sir or Madam," you might be quite likely to ignore it. Actually, if we can tailor it, it's far more likely to be successful. So basically, we can offer you support and advice on all of that if this feels like an approach that you might want to take. The other strategy I have, so is if you can't find anything suitable to apply for, another strategy is to look at what you can do to help you progress and create opportunities for yourself. So often we can feel a bit kind of deflated if there aren't things out there. And actually, in a lot of appointments, what we cover off with students and graduates is to turn this around and think, okay, what is possible and how can we widen the opportunities that might be available to us? So for this, I would recommend a couple of different steps that I'll talk through. So step one is to find out what skills, experience, or knowledge you'll need for the type of job you want to go into. So I'm using the example here of graphic designer just because I've used that in my Google search. So there are Prospects. Here is a website which is really useful. They've got this section called job profiles, which gives an overview of lots of different types of jobs and roles available. And part of this, I've just done a screen grab here of this little section. It's got lots of different areas that they'll cover in the job. So they'll talk about what responsibilities you might have, what the salary might be, what qualifications you might need, but then what skills you may need to go into this job role. So this is a screen grab from the skills section. So this is a really useful research tool if you feel like, actually, maybe I'm making some assumptions about the types of skills or what might be required of me if I want to go into this job role. It's a really useful place to do some research around that and just sense check if your thinking aligns to actually what the industry is asking for. So you can look at the skills that you might need in that role, and also you can have a look at the responsibilities section, which talks about what you might be doing in the job. And then the other thing we recommend is to look at several job adverts and make a list of the common criteria. So if I was wanting to break into the graphic design industry, I would go away and I would search, okay, graphic design jobs. And they don't necessarily have to be things that I'm going to apply for, because I'm using it as a research tool. So if I find a role, I don't know, if I find a role in Ireland that I know I'm not going to apply for, I can still use it as a research tool. So I would, if it was me, I'd probably look at something like 5 job adverts and start to notice what are the common things that each of these employers are asking for. What skills, what knowledge, what experience are they looking for in candidates? And that will help me to kind of create a short list of what it is employers may be looking for. And then you can speak with people working in the industry. So think about what questions is it that you have for them? What knowledge would help you to kind of understand what they might be looking for? So I would encourage you to reflect on that for yourself, because your questions might be different to my questions. But some examples I have is you may want to think about what do they feel is currently needed? Are there any gaps or difficulties that they are facing, particularly after the pandemic? Is there kind of a skills gap? Is there kind of particular problems they're working on that they would need help with? What skills, experience or knowledge would they look for in applicants? What would kind of help you to stand out? How do they generally find staff? Are they advertising through a formal process, or are they kind of coming and finding people through recommendations or through people writing to them with speculative applications? What's important to them when they're assessing those candidates? And are they aware of any opportunities, or where is it that they recommend you look for work? So it can be really useful, particularly if you want to get that industry specific knowledge, to have conversations with people working in the industry. And there is a workshop coming up tomorrow, which is around networking and tips and skills around networking, if you'd find that useful to learn some more around that. And one seed I just plant with you is sometimes people feel like they don't have a network, or maybe they don't know anyone working in their industry. But remember that if the industry you're looking to go into is linked to your course, maybe you've had a good relationship with a tutor or a lecturer in your course, and maybe they could be a first person to approach. But again, if you feel stuck, or you feel like you don't have a network yet, or you're not quite sure where to go, you can always book in with us and have an appointment and just chat that through. We can definitely offer some further advice on that, or go along to this workshop tomorrow. So step 1 is you've kind of understood, okay, what are the skills, knowledge and experience that people in the industry would be looking for if you're looking to apply for these roles. And the step 2 is to kind of do an audit of yourself against these skills, knowledge and experience. So think to yourself, okay, what is needed? Write a list of all the things that might be needed for this role that you want to go into, the things that you'd like to be able to put on your CV or in your application. And then think, do you already have this? And if you do, what examples can you provide? Or is this an area you need to develop? And then think, how or where might you develop this? Is it just in that specific role, as say graphic designer, or might you be able to develop those skills and that experience in other areas? So for example, I had a quick look, here's just an example to give it a bit of context of some areas you might need if you're looking to go into a graphic designer role. I'm using this just to kind of keep a common thread. So when I was having a quick look at some of these job adverts, one of the things that was needed is a knowledge of Adobe Creative Suite. And I thought to myself, okay, if I'd been studying that, I might have some knowledge of Adobe, and that might be from workshops I'd learned at university, and perhaps I might have done a module or some practical work where I'd used those software. But it also might be an area I felt like I needed to develop further, maybe in a professional context. And so I thought, okay, where or how might I develop this, and try to think really wide in that. So I thought, okay, I could do a LinkedIn learning course. I'll send a link to that in a minute, actually. At the end, I'll just write for myself, LinkedIn learning. So LinkedIn Learning is a great platform. There's loads of free courses on there, and you get access to that while you're studying at Spa University. So if you're about to graduate, you might want to make the most of that and just do a load of the courses on there because they're free to you whilst you're a current student. So I might do a LinkedIn Learning course, and then I can quote that on my application, say, oh yes, I've done this course. I might speak to graphic designers and employers to understand what knowledge is most relevant in those programs. Is there a particular software? Is there a particular, I don't know, a particular function that they use all the time, and some things that they use way less? And then I might actually just teach myself through YouTube tutorials. There's loads of information out there on ways that you can kind of self-educate yourself. So those are some of the thoughts I had on that. Experience of working with clients was another area that came up again and again. I imagined, okay, maybe as a student I may not have done that yet. Maybe I've just worked on kind of university modules, but not with clients. So, okay, this is an area I needed to develop. Where could I develop that? Is it just in a graphic design role, or actually maybe there are other roles? So I might begin to look for job roles that are client facing, and that could be around any kind of work that's client facing, so that I could build that experience. And maybe I'd think about the kind of opportunities I could create for myself. So maybe I'd offer free logo development for small businesses, and maybe just for a month I'd say, okay, I'm just going to do this as a voluntary thing, or do it as a reduced fee to get some clients, and that will give me that experience, and I'll be able to then use it in my applications in the future. Do you see what I mean? So thinking really widely, and this happens a lot in appointments, thinking with students or graduates, okay, how might you create that opportunity for yourself? What possibilities might there be? And so on. So I looked at time management and teamwork as some other areas. So basically, I really recommend having a little think about what is needed. What do you already have this? What evidence is there? Or do you need to develop this? And what are the widest spectrum of places that you might be able to develop this? So what I want to do is just set you a little timer. I know that you haven't had the time to go away and research your industry yet, but just think, okay, what can you write down one skill, piece of relevant experience or knowledge that you kind of imagine you may need in the kind of roles you want to go into? And have a think about, have you already done anything related to this, and how it is you might develop this further. So just, I'm going to set a timer for 1 minute. And just give this a first little go right now. And I'll stop talking because I'm dyslexic and I can never write when other people are talking. So I'll just set a timer and I'll stay quiet. Okay, go. Ten seconds remaining. Okay. Now, obviously, I've just given you a minute there. I do recommend having obviously much longer to think about this, but as I say, I'll send you these slides and you can reflect on these questions for yourself. And if you feel at all unsure either about finding what skills are needed or how you might gain this, you can come for an appointment with one of our team. So the final step is obviously then to take action. So to take action on your areas for development, think, okay, how can I develop these skill sets, and how do I go about creating those opportunities. And if you can't do this in the exact role you're looking for, think about widening your search. So what other roles might you apply for where you can develop those skills, experience, or knowledge that you need, or creating opportunities for yourself? What could you do or offer? Might you want to work for yourself? Might you want to, like, you know, with that graphic design example of offering free logo design for a couple of weeks or something, how might you kind of put yourself back in the person that makes those decisions and is in control of that? And so, like, for example, the other day I had an appointment with someone who was studying furniture design and was looking for a furniture design specific role and was really kind of struggling to find a relevant role. But then when we stepped back and looked at all the skills that they would need, we kind of discussed it and realized, actually, if they could apply for product design or kind of widen their search or do some kind of voluntary work for a month. So it suddenly felt towards the end of the appointment that there were lots more options and that it wasn't so narrow. So it's something I really recommend. And also from the employer's perspective, so I've been in the position of an employer before, looking through applications, and actually I think if you have those skill sets and you have that experience, you know, from different places where you've got transferable skills, that's just as valid a lot of the time. The other thing that I wanted to highlight and mention, in case you weren't aware of it, is that if you're looking to stay in the southwest of the UK, then check out the GradTalent Development Agency. So this is part of Bath Spa Career Service, and it's kind of a partnership between Bath Spa University and other universities and colleges. And the GradTalent Development Agency offers a personalised employment service designed to assist graduates from the Southwest to secure local graduate opportunities. So their whole function is really to support you to find work, to create jobs. So I just think it's a really good service in case you didn't know about it. And they've got a Twitter account, so if you just want to check out some of the kind of opportunities they've been advertising, you can have a look there. Or you can sign up on the website. So just a couple of tips finally on making applications and how to keep on top of things. So following up applications, it's really not unusual to have to chase people, to have to get back in touch with people, and especially for speculative applications. So if that feels like an approach you'd like to take, I really encourage you to follow up your application afterwards. You might want to put that in your diary. You know, maybe you sent it one week and you maybe want to chase them a couple of weeks later, and it's even something you can put in your application itself. So maybe in your cover letter you might say, oh, I'll get in touch with you next week, just if I haven't heard anything back, just to check in about this application, if there are any opportunities with you. So just to say, because I have a lot of conversations again with students and graduates who maybe feel that can make you feel a bit insecure if you haven't heard anything back and you're worried about potentially chasing people, just to say it's really normal. People are busy. It's often not personal. It's just that, you know what it's like, sometimes you're just like meant to ring someone and you forget. So really don't feel bad at all about chasing people, but be professional, and always be professional. I'd say particularly if you don't get a job that you're looking for, just always remember to be professional, because in my experience, you never know when you might run into that person again, or whether there might be another opportunity with that organisation you might want to apply for. So it sounds like an obvious one, but it's an important one. And then some tips in terms of just keeping on top of things. We really recommend creating a way of tracking where you've applied to and when, and any next steps you might want to take. So often when you're applying for roles, it's a really good idea to be applying to lots of places, almost, you want to treat it almost like a part-time job in itself, just sending out applications, finding places, applying to places. But what you don't want to do, of course, is like lose track of that and then apply to the same place again. So keep track of it. For me, I find a simple spreadsheet really easy, and also putting things in my diary in terms of following up my application. So for me, that's what I find helpful, because it'll then ping a reminder and it makes sure I do that. Or maybe you want to ask feedback if you're not successful. Maybe you've applied for a job and you need to remind yourself to do that. So yeah, whatever works for you. And then also keeping track of the relevant skills, knowledge or experience or achievements even that you develop along your journey. So like that spreadsheet where we looked at before, okay, here's the skills and experience that I might need, here's the places that I have already done that. It's a really good idea if you can, if you potentially, maybe you do land a job, to keep a little track, a little note of the things that you are developing, because it will help you with your future applications. So that's just another little tip. A colleague of mine has got this like massive master spreadsheet of all of these different skills areas, and for me I find it really helpful, particularly if I've dealt with a difficult situation and it's resolved itself in a really good way, to note down things, or maybe I've achieved something really particularly. I've been helping my sister recently with her applications, and she's leaving a job, and before she leaves her job, she wants to make sure she notes down all of the kind of numbers of in terms of the achievements she's done. She works in social media, so she wants to look at how she's helped to develop and grow their audience, and make sure she has all of those kind of facts and figures and evidence in place for her next job application. So that's what she's thinking about. So before we move on to kind of strategies for kind of surviving and thriving, has anyone got any questions so far on those kind of some kind of approaches to looking for work? No? Okay, great. Well, feel free if you want to pop some things in the chat, or equally stay around at the end. So now moving on to surviving and thriving in difficult times. So I get locked down, but I get up again. We have been definitely in an unprecedented and tricky time for some people. Some people have loved it as well. And I think for all of us, maybe it's had its ups and its downs. So as I said, here are some kind of things that I wanted to share that might be helpful strategies, again, for dealing with difficult times. So around building resilience, dealing with the rejection, and also challenging your inner critic. So I'm just seeing a question in the chat. Can you use perspective applying for companies with different cultures? Yes, yeah, it's quite, I'd say it's quite a universal approach. It's not necessarily just a UK-based approach, but you can also, I'll share a link with you, Charlie, at the end. I'll share a link. Prospects has got a really good site in terms of international applications. And it kind of goes, it talks a little bit about how to apply for work in different countries. So that will definitely, if you're looking for specific countries, you can have a look and research maybe the cultural norms there. And also, yeah, you might, you're right, research for yourself. You might put in, you know, if it was me, I'd do a quick search term in terms of, okay, speculative applications in Singapore or something like this, because they may have, yeah, different cultural norms. But yeah, we can have, I'll share that link with you at the end. No worries. Okay, so thinking about stress that we might experience and resilience. So resilience is a term I had heard a lot about, but didn't quite understand what it meant. So I thought it was good to actually explain what on earth is resilience. So stress is the body's reaction to feeling threatened or under pressure. And resilience is the capacity to positively respond to and cope with stress, difficult situations, events, or setbacks. So basically our ability to deal with stress. Resilience helps us deal with stress. So understanding what causes us stress, what our warning signs for ourselves are, and how we can manage our stress levels is a key part of looking after our well-being. And the stress container can help us to understand this. So this is a kind of a model, an idea, the stress container. And I've found a lot of this information from Mental Health First Mental Health First England, I think it's called. I'll send a link at the end. And I think they've got like really good approaches and just really understandable kind of ways of discussing looking after our well-being. And I find the stress container a really good one for that. So it's the idea that we all have a container that stress essentially goes into, is our container. And this container can be different sizes for different people. Some people have a much bigger capacity to deal with lots of stress. Some people might have a smaller capacity to deal with stress, and that'll just be dependent on your personal experience, your background. And the stress will go into this container, and it can either overflow, and that's where we might face difficult times, or it can be released. So that's what we're going to explore today. So I just want to, first of all, I just want you to write down 3 possible sources of stress, and you can write that for yourself, or you can write it in the chat box. I'll write some ideas in the chat box here. Okay. So there might be some different things, might be money issues, deadlines, family, COVID, lockdown, work pressures, personal pressures, the reality of what's going on at the moment. So there might be lots of different kind of things that are causing us stress. And again, like I'm sure we're all aware, different things will cause different people stress, right? So then, when your stress levels build up, this container essentially overflows and issues develop. And this looks different for everybody. But we often, we each have different stress signature, what might be called a stress signature. And that's what I was talking about with the kind of warning signs for stress. So some common signs, our container is overflowing, include some people might get irritable or tearful. Some people might get really indecisive, or might find it hard to concentrate, or might procrastinate. Maybe watch 10,000 episodes of Netflix when you know you've got a deadline. I definitely do that one. Frequent tiredness sometimes can be a kind of a sign, or headaches or stomach upsets. So I want us to think a little bit about our stress container. So just for yourself, or if you want to share it, you can, but just for yourself, think a little bit. Here's some examples of what is your stress signature. So when you're really stressed, what does that look like? And I'm just going to give us a little 30-second timer to think for yourself, okay, when I'm really stressed, what does that look like? And it might be one of these things here, or it might be something completely different. It's completely different for every person. Okay. 30 seconds up. So I put, for me, it's withdrawing. So I definitely feel when I'm stressed, I don't want to deal with anyone. I just want to lock myself away. And I definitely recognize the procrastination one. So in the evenings, after work, if I've got a big jobs list of things that I need to do either in work or in home life, I will often just really procrastinate and often watch a lot of TV to get out of my stress. That's my kind of stress signature. So whatever it is for you, as I say, it can be different for different people. You might find that you can't sleep. Some people drink alcohol, are irritable, have a tight chest, they might withdraw. You might have the opposite. You might not withdraw. You might actually go out and see people a lot and kind of deal with stress in that way. You might stay up really late. You might feel tearful, irritable, bite your nails. All of these different things can be our stress signature. So kind of tuning into that and noticing our warning signs can help us recognize when we might be experiencing stress or about to experience stress before it's kind of too late, as it were. So then how do we, that's all well and good. We know what goes in. We know the stressful stuff. We know how we might react to stress. But actually, how can we kind of helpfully react to stress, and how can we develop our resilience? And it's really this idea of releasing the tap. So this is the key bit of the stress container, is that there should be a tap here, or there is a tap here, which will allow us to release some of the stress through coping methods. So helpful coping methods, I can't get my words out today, helpful coping methods can act as a tap to let stress out of the container and stop it from overflowing. But on the other hand, unhelpful coping methods can block the tap. So actually, it's this idea that unhelpful coping methods are things that we may turn to, but ultimately, actually, they may make our stress container, might just delay the problem and might make us more stressed ultimately. So some helpful coping methods are being active, time for hobbies, things that bring us joy, perhaps talking to a friend. And some common unhelpful coping methods are drinking to excess, overworking. So this idea that I'm really stressed and I'll just work until 3 in the morning doesn't always, help us to deal with that stress, and bottling up feelings. So what I want us to do now is just have a little think about, obviously we're going to focus on the helpful coping methods. And what I want you to do is just spend 1 minute writing down as many helpful coping methods as you can. So just think, okay, what might some other helpful coping methods be for you? If you're happy to share them, you can post them in the chat. If you want to keep it personal, as I say, that's completely fine. And I will post some ideas that I have in the chat, and I'll just put a little timer on now. Okay, that's a minute up. So we've got some great ideas going on in the chat here. But as I said, this will kind of be different for every person, because some things that bring people loads of joy, other people completely hate. So start to tune in and notice the things that you kind of enjoy that maybe alleviate your stress. So what I want you to do is now think, either you can have a look back through the chat, or just think for yourself, okay, what are 2 things that I could actually do today? What are 2 helpful coping methods that I might do today? Okay, and the last thing I want you to do is to think about 1 idea that you could do in 10 minutes or less. And again, if you're happy to share that in the chat, that would be great. I did this workshop fairly recently with the different groups, so I'll just share some of their ideas for things that you could do in 10 minutes or less. And if you have any thoughts as well, feel free to share them. A nice one. So some of the things that are being shared here that you could do in 10 minutes or less are going for a walk in a field, listening to a podcast, just dancing around to 1 song. Most songs are 3 or 4 minutes long maximum. You could just dance around rapidly to 1 song, doing some journaling or meditation. stepping outside just for 10 minutes. So this is something that was suggested in another workshop by someone else that I now do. So sometimes if I've got lots of meetings, I'll go, oh, I've got 10 minutes, and it's really easy to stay at my desk. Whereas actually now I try to go, actually I've got 10 minutes, I can just go and stand outside my front door for 10 minutes. And particularly when it's sunny, I'm such a little lizard, I love the sun. And so I just go stand outside for 10 minutes, and it makes, you know, it really helps actually. Reading a chapter, just reading one chapter of a book. Giving a friend or a family a call, that's a really nice one. Another one that someone suggested is if you live with other people, you could schedule in a little coffee date. So you can just say, actually at 10 o'clock every day, let's have a coffee, and we'll just have like a cup of tea or coffee or whatever, you know, whatever you're like to drink, glass of water. But just to see people in that kind of short way. Or even, you know, if you can, meeting up with people for a little walk, something like this. So I just wanted to plant the seed that these things, you know, sometimes it can feel like an extra job to look after our well-being, I suppose, and it can feel like an extra thing we have to do. But maybe just think about what are these kind of daily things that we can do. So noticing your stress signature first of all. So if you're not quite sure what you do, I think most of us just know what we're like when we're stressed, right? Or what our warning signs might be. But if you're not sure, if you've got someone you trust, a friend or family member, I'm sure they're sure, so you can ask them. But just start to notice, what are my warning signs? And notice them and realize actually this is a point where maybe I need to release my tap. Maybe I need to put in some helpful coping mechanisms soon. You might also notice what causes you stress and what coping methods work for you. So you might try out some things and go, oh, actually, I thought that would really work, but it really doesn't. But you can test it out. And then how can you build these coping methods into your life? So how can you prepare for stressful moments? By planning in coping methods. So stress can come from kind of all different places. And sometimes we can predict when there's going to be a stressful time coming up. Imagine deadline time if you're at university, or sometimes even like amazing, joyful things can bring us stress. So maybe if you're moving house, you might be really excited about it, but you might also know it's going to bring you some stress. So how can you plan in some coping methods? And then also, what coping methods can you have and that you can use for unpredictable stress? Because we can't always predict what's going to happen, right? I mean, I think the last couple of years has showed us that more than anything. So just think to yourself, take some time to reflect, okay, what things can I have in my pocket for when there is that stressful moment that I wasn't anticipating? Maybe it is just stepping away for a moment. Maybe you don't get a job that you were hoping to get. And you go, actually, my coping method is I'm going to go stand outside the front door, I'm going to listen to my favourite song just for 10 minutes, and then I'm going to go back in and deal with it. And it can just really help us kind of reset our mindset sometimes and look after ourselves. And so now I just want to talk briefly about dealing with failures and tackling your inner critic. Because I think really that the thing to know is that failure on some level is inevitable. But I think most people in you know, your life probably will have had a moment where they felt like they've dealt with failure or disappointment. But how can we turn it around and make it useful is what I would say. That's the kind of the practical application. How can we make it into a kind of a positive or into a useful thing? So I think one thing I would say is to reflect and get feedback. So coming back for a moment to making applications and applying for roles, it can sometimes feel like this exhausting thing of applying to places. But I think reflecting and getting feedback can then be really helpful tools to help us in the future. So a couple of tips are, after applying for a role, take the time to reflect on what went well. So what did you do? What did you absolutely nail? You're like, that was so good. I was ready for that question. I set time aside for my application, whatever it is. What went well? What would you do differently? And also what you weren't expecting, particularly if there are any things that you're like, oh, I didn't know that question was going to come up in interview. That's quite a common one. Or perhaps you thought you'd set enough time for your application and you sent it to us and we had so much feedback and you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that much feedback. I didn't really give enough time. So what went well? What would you do differently? And what you weren't expecting, just having some time to reflect. And then if you didn't get the job, so if you apply for a job and you don't get it, I really recommend asking them for specific feedback. And this will basically help you to develop and help you to kind of with your future applications. And also from an employer's point of view, if you're applying to a company where there might be other opportunities in the future, it's great to get that kind of feedback from them, because it can help you to improve, but it can also help them to understand that you're taking it seriously and you want to grow and you want to develop. And there are loads of articles online about how to ask for feedback, particularly after an interview is a really common place, because that's often where you'll get a kind of response as to whether or not you got the role. And so I've hyperlinked these, so when you get the slides, you'll get a hyperlink to a couple of articles that kind of talk about how you might go about asking for that feedback. And then the other thing I wanted to think about was this idea of the inner critic and the kind of the voice inside our heads, that the I should have done this, the things we beat ourselves up about, and how to turn your inner critic into your inner coach. And this came from a workshop I attended from a woman who runs a company called Fuck Being Humble, which is all about self-promotion and progression in the workplace. And I just thought it was such a nice idea that I wanted to include it in this session. So our inner critic mindset, this is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about inner critic. So our inner critic mindset are these thoughts that we might have around, I should have done this, I didn't know what to say or do, or I don't know this. And this can sometimes really get in the way for us from moving forward with things. So I certainly speak to a lot of, again, in appointments with students and graduates who perhaps do have this inner critic voice, and I think to an extent we all have it, but I think if it helps you, if it stops you from progressing, that's where it becomes a real issue, this inner critic, and that's a really common thing. So actually, how can we shift from an inner critic mindset to a growth mindset, into a kind of actions and development mindset? So if you attend an event, you go to an interview, you write an application, and you come away thinking, I should have done this, I should have done this. What I recommend is turning it into instead, okay, moving forward, I'll do this. Or if you are at a networking event and someone says, tell me about yourself, and you come away going, I didn't know what to say or do, I froze in that moment. Next time, can you change that into a growth mindset? Can you go, how can I prepare so I know what to say or do next time? Or if you don't know about something, maybe you feel stuck, you're like, I want to get into this industry, but I don't know anything about it. That can feel like a total, a line drawn and we can't move past that. But actually, if we shift it instead into a, how can I find out more about this? Do you see what I mean? It's all about how can we, and it's not necessarily that your inner critic will stop straight away, but you might start to notice it and think about, how can I shift it forward into a growth mindset? So I want you to just take a little minute again. We'll just start with, let's do 30 seconds first on what insecurities are holding you back. What kind of things, and this, I think, just keep it to yourself unless you really want to share, but it's quite a personal thing. So just either think, write down, draw, if that's how your mind works. Think a little bit about, okay, what are those things that are holding you back? What does your inner critic say to you? I'll give you 30 seconds to have a think about that. Okay, and now moving on to the next one, just thinking again, what actions could you take to address this? So how can you shift this inner critic into an action space? And I'll put up the last slide, because actually sometimes it's helpful to kind of have some examples in front of you. So think about, what are your insecurities, and you can just maybe pick one if it's useful to start with, and I'll give you 30 seconds. Think about how you can shift that into a kind of growth mindset, into some actions. Okay. So as I say, I think this I recommend, as ever, spend longer than a minute thinking about this. But notice as well, maybe it is after an interview, maybe it is after an application. You might have your I should haves or I wish I had done's, or and maybe just take, even if it's 15 minutes or something, to think through, okay, how can I turn that into actions? How can I stop my inner critic and start my inner coach? Okay, so in today's session, this is kind of what we've looked at. So we've looked at some strategies for finding work. So again, just to remind you how we can kind of support you, that's our role, that's what we're here for, is to support you with your application, support you if you're stuck on where to look for work. We can help you with all of those kind of things. Some strategies, a couple of strategies on what to do if you can't find a suitable job to apply for. So you might want to try out the speculative applications, or you might try to widen your search beyond this kind of specific area, or think about how you can create opportunities for yourself by first reflecting on what is it that I need to gain, and where are all the different spaces that I might be able to gain those things. And then obviously sharing some tips on applications and keeping on top of things. I'll share the slides with you with all of that afterwards. And then surviving and thriving in difficult times. So building resilience, dealing with failure, and challenging your inner critic so that it doesn't stop you, but it pushes you forward. So that is the end of the session today. I will be around if you have any questions. And as I mentioned before, there is some feedback, so I'll just share the form here. So if you're able to offer us any feedback on how the session was, and particularly if you find the format of remote working, if that kind of works for you or doesn't work for you, or you'd like a blend of workshops in person and remotely moving forward, please do give us some feedback. That would be really valuable. And also, I mentioned quite a few events throughout the session that you might want to come along to. So we've got loads of other stuff kind of happening. So that's that second link there, my career, with the events at the end, is a link to where you can go and see all of the different kind of events that are happening and book a slot if that would be useful to you. But yeah, I will stay around for 5 minutes now. If you want to disappear, I would encourage you to take that 5 minutes to maybe do one of your little joy-bringing things and to build your resilience. But I'll be here, and just to remind you that the slides and the recording will get sent to you within 5 working days. So that will get sent to you by this time next week at the latest, probably a bit sooner. But I'm here if you have any questions. Thanks so much for coming along. Charlie, so what advice do you have for not getting stuck in a job or area? Do you want to, it might be helpful, I'm going to stop the recording.